Hey there, guys. It's Nick, the ASMR nerd. And today I've got a real treat for you guys, something that I am very excited about. We look at a lot of mainstream mechanical keyboards here on the channel, don't we? But the rabbit hole goes much, much deeper, and I've hinted at this a number of times. There is much more to the mechanical keyboard enthusiast community than the kind of mainstream boards that I tend to look at here on the channel. And even slightly more interesting or uncommon layouts like a 60% or 75% keyboard are pretty mainstream these days compared to some of the more exotic designs out there. So today we're looking at a keyboard called the Preonic Rev3, and this is just gonna let us dip our toes, go a little further down into the mechanical keyboard enthusiast rabbit hole, and I hope you guys like what you see. There's a few interesting things about the Preonic Rev3. The first is that it is incredibly compact, smaller even than the 60% keyboards that I've reviewed here on this channel, and yet it retains almost all of the functionality of said boards. It has up to 60 keys, 59 in the default configuration, which is only one or two physical keys less than a 60% board. Another thing that's really interesting about the Preonic is that it is what is called ortholinear, an ortholinear keyboard. This means that the rows of keys are all lined up on a grid rather than being staggered and offset as you go up the rows. And this has the advantage of allowing them to pack more keys into a smaller footprint. It's all about space efficiency while retaining maximum functionality. And perhaps the most interesting thing about the Preonic is that you have to build it yourself. It doesn't come pre-assembled. So that's what I'm going to be doing here today. This is not going to be a review in the traditional sense. Rather, it's going to be an unboxing, build log, and somewhat of a tutorial. And now I say somewhat because I've not actually built a keyboard from scratch before. Despite talking about keyboards here all the time, I've reviewed dozens at this point. I've never built one from scratch. So this kit does come with all the pieces you need. It comes with the case, the PCB, right, the circuit board. It comes with the back plate. It comes with the screws and spacers, and the stabilizers and the keycaps. In fact, the only thing it's missing, by default anyway, the base package, is the switches, and you can pick those up for yourself. But the big advantage of this kit is that it's got a hot swap PCB, so there's no soldering required to put this thing together, and that's always something that I certainly appreciate. Don't want to really have to get my hands messy with soldering. Most people would rather not. So the hot swap sockets of this PCB make this a very appealing kit for a first time builder like myself, and perhaps like many of you. And I have had a video on the channel here where I did build a DIY keyboard. And this is kind of the next step beyond that, because that kit, the GK61 that I built, it came essentially pre-assembled, except you had to pop in the switches and you had to put on your own keycaps. Whereas with this, the Preonic kit, we're going to be putting the PCB and the plate into the case and building it up basically from the ground up. So this is going to be my first time keyboard building experience in that sense, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you guys enjoy coming along for the ride. Now, couple of things. The Preonic Rev3 is a collaboration between OLKB and a company called drop.com. Now, OLKB is a keyboard design house, and they're well known for their compact ortholinear designs. In fact, OLKB stands for ortholinear keyboard. And they're very famous for an even more compact design called the Plank. It's a 40% design. You may have heard of it before. The Preonic is what they call their 50% design. And they are collaborating with drop.com. Now, you've maybe heard of drop.com before. They recently underwent a rebranding. Previously, they were called Massdrop, and that name might be more familiar to you. In fact, the product we're looking at today still has the Massdrop branding on it. It is officially called the Massdrop Cross OLKB Preonic Rev3. But the way drop.com works is it's a group buy website, which essentially leverages the power of groups of people buying things together and offering them for cheaper than they would be if people were buying them on an individual basis, or offering them at all. Sometimes these products just wouldn't be available without having a critical mass of buyers. And so it's a kind of a community-driven website in that people make polls and vote in those polls for what kind of products they'd like to see. And then products that are requested enough get what's called a drop, which is the opportunity for people to buy in to a manufacturing run of that particular product. And that's usually a limited time thing. So in this case, the Preonic Rev3 is actually going to be on sale. A drop is starting for it the day that this video comes out. So if you're watching this close to when it was published, then hey, you're in luck. You might be able to go pick up or buy into the drop for the Rev3. They're usually pretty limited in time. I honestly don't know exactly how long this drop for the Preonic Rev3 is going to run for, but I think they're typically on the order of like 7 to 10 days. So they're pretty limited time. And if you're interested in what I build in this video, you probably want to go check it out ASAP. There is a link, of course, down in the video description, and the base kit for the Preonic runs $170. That has everything you need to build the board except the switches. So bring your own switches or get your own on drop.com. They have a number of switches available there too. As a matter of fact, the switches that I'm using today are another collaboration that Drop has done with Input Club. And these switches are the Halo Clear switches. They are a somewhat uncommon, kind of rare actually, and fairly highly sought after tactile switch that is similar to the Cherry MX Brown, but different and improved in a handful of ways. We'll take a look at that later. I'll talk about it a bit more. In fact, I've been talking to you a lot here already. So, but to wrap it up anyway, drop.com was kind enough to send over a Preonic Rev3 kit for us to look at here today, for me to assemble and show to you guys. So I'm really excited to have you guys along for the ride on what I am considering my first real formal keyboard build from the ground up, the Massdrop Cross OLKB Preonic Rev3 50% ortholinear mechanical keyboard. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Let's check it out. And here we have the Preonic Rev3 in box. Of course, it's in pieces. That's the whole point of today's video. We're going to be assembling the Preonic. So let's just take a quick tour of the outside of the box. It's very simple, appealingly simple. I really appreciate the cleanliness and simplicity of this box. It just says up in the top corner here, Massdrop cross OLKB, to indicate it's a collaboration. Below it says Preonic mechanical keyboard. And then we have a schematic depiction of the finished keyboard. The cleanliness and simplicity of this box is reflective, or is appropriate, I guess I should say, for what's inside. Because inside this keyboard, as you can see, the finalized keyboard is also very, very clean, very tidy, very ordered, very efficient. There's a goal, after all. There's a little bit of information here on the back. What does it say? Just a bit of information about Drop, formerly Massdrop. Massdrop is community-driven commerce. We collaborate with brands you respect, make products with your ideal features, and help you bring your own designs to life. And then some certifications over here. Manufactured in China. And then the only other thing on the outside of this box is this right here. Just a barcode with some product information, and it says Massdrop Cross OLKB Preonic Keyboard Round 4 case. Round 4, I guess this is the fourth drop, the fourth round for this particular board. Case purple. The acute set of keycaps, which is the only keycap set that comes with this board, although of course you could get your own and put them on. And an MX style plate, because we will be putting in MX style switches. You can also order it with a plate that lets you install Alps style switches. If you're a real keyboard nerd and you have some of those kicking around. But those do have to be soldered. They do not work with the hot swap sockets, unlike the MX style switches that we're going to be using here today. Okay, so that's the outside of the box. Not a lot to see, but I really appreciate the clean aesthetic. It feels very solid, this whole package. There's a premium feel to it, one might say. Let's open it up, if we can. Sometimes the hardest part is getting these flaps open. Okay. Alright. So, inside, we are greeted with what looks like a little user manual, instruction manual. OLKB Massdrop, the Preonic keyboard. And underneath that is our case. My goodness, look at how tiny this case is. My hand. I have pretty small hands. And so, for scale, you can see just how small this thing is. It's itty bitty. It's so cute. It's a little baby keyboard. I knew this was going to be small, but this is even smaller than I had anticipated. Huh. Okay, so lovely purple case, machined aluminum. Let's just pop it out of the bag while we're going through here. So yeah, this lovely CNC machined aluminum case. It's got these beveled edges all the way around. No harsh edges or cutting corners. These corners are smoothed right down. Finish, I think, is actually slightly different than what I saw on their website. This looks more like a blasted kind of finish. Maybe, I don't know if they do this with sandblasting or what, but it's, that kind of texture rather than kind of a machined texture with the lines, but it's gorgeous either way. And you can see up here we have a little USB-C cutout for the cable. On the back we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screw holes, which will be used to hold our PCB and back plate in place, I suspect. And it says here Massdrop cross OLKB. And we have a tiny little reset button there. So imagine you can poke something through there to press a button on the PCB, which will reset that. And then a sticker down here with some additional information and certifications. Lovely case though. Look how thick this aluminum is. Look at that. It's probably like, well, I'm not good with inches, but almost a ½ centimeter thick. Alright. So, makes some kind of nice sounds, doesn't it? It certainly has nice weight to it. Also, I just love the color. It's this beautiful, kind of cool purple. Somewhat iridescent. I really dig it. Alright, let's put that aside for the moment. It is available in other colors, of course. Not just purple. I believe it's available in silver and a darker kind of gunmetal and red and orange and maybe blue. I can't remember. You'll have to check their page for it. Also available as an acrylic case if you wanted to go that route. And well, we'll talk about it in a second, but the PCB doesn't come with any LEDs in it, but it includes footprint spots for underglow LEDs, which you would use with the acrylic case. Okay. We fold that out of the way. And inside we've got a whole bevy of keyboard goodies. So first and foremost, we've got those keycaps. They are lovely. They are made of PBT. The legends are dye-sub, so they will never wear. And you can see it comes with a whole collection of colors. The alphas are in white. Then the mods are available in dark gray, which you can see in here. We'll pull a couple of these out in a second. But then there's also accent color modifiers in what looks like orange and purple. So you can swap those out as you desire. The sound of keycaps like this kind of sounds like Lego to me a little bit. Let's just pull a couple out, take a closer look. If I can get this back open. we go. It's actually really thick plastic bag. It feels like quality. Love that sound. Okay, there's our number 6. The finish is lightly textured, not too rough, certainly not as rough as the Massdrop Control, which I've been using for a while now, and which you guys will see a review for in the not too distant future, probably. But it's pleasant. Also, the material nice and thick, as one would hope. Yeah, it's zero flex on these caps. I cannot get them to flex at all. Really, really spectacular build quality there. Nice and thick. How I like them. There's one of the dark gray caps. Again, these legends are printed using the dye sublimation technique, which means they will never fade, really. The dye is chemically bonded, essentially infused into the plastic, so there's nothing to wear off. That's the orange cap. These are, of course, not shine-through caps, because this is not a backlit board. Let's pull out one of those purples. There's the purple. That will look awfully nice beside those dark gray modifiers on that purple case. Very nice. Okay. Put those over here. What else do we have here? Okay, we've got a variety of screws and nuts and spacers, which we will be using to install our PCB and our backplate. And then this item here, I think, is just for torquing the nuts and the spacers, I guess, for tightening them up. That's my guess, anyway. Okay, here we have stabilizers. Just a small, two small stabilizers there. That'll be for the spacebar button. That's the only one that needs it, because all the others are just 1U size, so they don't need stabilizers. And then I think these are little rubber feet that you can put on the bottom of the case if you so choose. Just right there. Oh, this is nice. Look at this cable. That's very pretty indeed. It's a nicely sheathed USB-A to USB Type-C cable. We'll take it out here. I think it deserves a look. So no branding or anything on the cable, but the housing on each end is metal, probably aluminum, which is It's really nice. It looks like it's a USB 3 cable, which seems maybe a little unnecessary. I don't think we need USB 3 transfer speeds for our keyboard, but there it is anyway. And then the USB-C end of things that'll plug into the keyboard. And look at this gorgeous sheathing job. It's beautiful. Nice tight weave on it, very smooth. It's not rough at all. Nice thick gauge on the cable. Has a high quality USB cable, my friends, and will match the keyboard very nicely. Okay, now we're getting down to the real meat of it. This is probably the PCB. That's why it's packed in this anti-static bag, I would imagine. We'll save that for last. Let's just take a quick look at the back plate here. So this is a steel back plate, and evidently it has had the rough edges machined away, the sharp edges. Sort of. It still feels kind of sharp, if I'm going to be real. But I read that was one of the selling points on this revision of the Preonic. In previous revisions, people had issues where sometimes the edges of these holes for the switches were a little too sharp, and they're causing problems with the switches when they're popping them in. But evidently that's been rectified. So anyway, nice, decently thick steel. There's a good weight to it. Feels very solid. So there is the back plate, and of course it's got screw holes, which we'll be making use of. Alright. And let's just get this box out of the way. That's everything that's in there. Here is the PCB, the printed circuit board. Oh, I didn't expect it to be black. For some reason I thought it would be white. But there it is. So this PCB is in black. And you can see, gosh, we've got all kinds of stuff on here. Look at that. This is over here, OLKB Preonic. 2018, it says Rev3 right there. I don't know if you can see that, but has a little icon here, a little logo indicating this board uses QMK firmware. It has a little footprint here. This might be for, I think it's for dip switches. If you wanted to put a little bank of dip switches on there, you could do that. We're not going to do that. It's got several other interesting items on here. I'm just going to turn around so I can look at it. Of course, got our USB-C connector up here. And then I think that this little chip right here is our controller. You can see it there with all the little traces coming out of it. I believe that is an ARM STM32 controller. Fairly certain. I don't know anything about it. I haven't looked into it in terms of, you know, what kind of microprocessor it's got in there, but anyway, there it is. This board also comes with a little speaker built into it. And I'm just trying to figure out where on here that would be. I don't see it. It's got to be on here though. I'm sure it'll jump out at me as we're building, but it'll make a little series of beeps and boops and things upon power up, and I believe it will also make some sounds when you change layouts and things like that, and flash the firmware and a few other things. But that can also be disabled if you don't want it to be beeping and booping at you. You can also see around the margin a few spots, like right here, here. We've got footprints for those LEDs I was telling you about there. So you could install them for underglow if you wanted. And of course we've got our through holes for our screws here, there, and over here as well, for when we're mounting this in the case. There are a handful of other footprints on here, I know, for various SMD devices that honestly I don't fully understand and will not take advantage of. Believe there is a way, if you want to turn this into a wireless, a Bluetooth keyboard, using the available footprints, but you would need to buy some additional components, and you would have to do some soldering, of course. But it's a little more ambitious than what I'm looking to do right now. Right now, we're just going to build this with what's available in the box, and then some switches as well. Speaking of which, why don't we put this aside for the time being, and why don't we take a look at those switches? So these switches do not come with the base kit, but you can order them as an extra. And of course this is a hot swappable board, so you can order some switches to start with, and then you can swap them out later if you want. These are Halo Clear switches, which are made in collaboration between Massdrop and Input Club, I believe, and manufactured by Kaiwa, who also makes the Kale brand of switches. So the manufacturer certainly knows their way around a keyboard switch. And two switches were made out of this collaboration. There were the Halo Trues, which are designed to emulate the feel of a top ray switch, which is kind of almost a hybrid membrane mechanical switch, but not in the bad way. They are apparently quite unique feeling. I've never typed on a top ray switch before. There's some debate in the mechanical keyboard community as to whether they're just expensive, membrane-based switches. I mean, they are in their function, but top ray fans swear by them. I've never used them. Those are the Halo Trues that are supposed to emulate that feel. These, the Halo Clears, are look at those. Look at those banks of switches. The Halo Clears are designed to emulate Cherry MX Clears, which are a heavier and more tactile version of their browns. So many people are familiar with the Cherry MX Brown. It is a standard workhorse tactile switch. It falls somewhere in between a red, which is perfectly linear, and a blue, which has a distinct click to it. The browns have a tactile bump, so you get that tactile feedback without the noise of a blue. So the Cherry MX clears were made with the same mechanism but a heavier spring. So they take a little bit more force to depress and even more force to bottom out. These Halo clears are inspired by the Cherry MX clears, designed to feel somewhat like them, with a heavier tactile bump than an MX Brown, and importantly, the clear housing. Because despite being called Cherry MX clears, the actual Cherry MX clears were never made with the clear top housing, and that means that they're not suitable for RGB applications, whereas these guys are. That said, this board does not have RGB LEDs. No, it's not backlit, so we're not using them in that capacity here. Nonetheless, this is a really interesting feel. You can hear that. The tactile bump is quite pronounced. And it's right at the top of the action. There's almost no preload. So you press down and it's almost straight into that bump. And then the force curve of these switches is interesting in that it gets quite high at the bottom. So bottoming out these switches is actually a bit of a chore. You probably don't want to bottom them out when you type. They are pretty stiff. I will say, there's quite a bit of weight to that spring. But they are also smoother than Cherry MX Browns. Their action is very smooth, all one smooth motion. Very interesting feel. I've never used Halo clears before. I've never even used Cherry MX clears, actually. They're not a common switch. So this is my first experience with anything kind of close to a Cherry MX clear. And I am on the record as saying that tactile switches are my preference, and I'm still searching for the perfect tactile switch. I love Gatoron clears, or Gatoron Browns, pardon me, because they are so smooth. They're also very light. This has a bit more oomph behind it and a more pronounced tactile bump. I'd like to get a full set of Zelios one day, because this reminds me a bit of those. But I do really love this smoothness. And evidently that smoothness is another one of the benefits of these Halo clears over the Cherry MX clears. Put this by your ear so you can hear it. Very interesting switch. I'm really keen to see how this feels to type on, because the tactile bump is definitely more pronounced than, for instance, a Kale Box Brown, or even a Kale Box Burnt Orange. The bump in those is pretty subtle. Even though the burnt oranges are heavier switches, the bump itself is pretty subtle, whereas this is really quite noticeable. We'll see if that translates to the typing feel. Okay, so we've got, as you can see, a full complement of these switches. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 banks of, I believe, 10 switches apiece. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. For a total of 90 switches, which is significantly more than we need, actually, for this board, because this PCB, this setup, is designed for 60, I suppose, switches at most, but 59 really, because that space bar is a 2U wide, so You have 59 physical keys on this board with the standard layout, which is, for those counting, exactly 2 physical switches less than a 60% board. So you're losing a teensy bit of functionality in terms of physical switches, but in exchange, you're saving even more desk space with this tiny little board. It's so tiny. It's so small. It's so cute. I'll do a comparison actually. After we've got the thing built, I'll put it side by side with the standard 60% so you can see just how much smaller it is. It certainly feels significantly smaller, just from the parts we've got here. Okay, well, now that we've looked at all of our pieces, I guess it's time to put this thing together. So let's get started. Alright, so looking at the instructions here, the first thing that we're going to do is install the stabilizers. And the stabilizers are these little pieces right here. This kit actually comes with 2 stabilizers. A normal keyboard has many more, but the stabilizers are just to, they sit under the larger keys, and they make it so they don't rock back and forth. Like your space bar has a stabilizers installed under it, your enter key, your backspace. But because our layout, the default layout, mind you, only has a single wider key, this space bar here, this 2 key wide space bar, we only need to install one of these. And I don't think it's going to be too difficult to do. However, I am going to add an additional step to this process, and that is I'm going to lubricate the stabilizer. Now, I've never done this before, but I watched a video, and I'm going to give it a shot. The reason you lube a stabilizer is because it tames some of the rattle and the clackiness that you get. I strongly dislike rattly stabilizers. It just lends to the keyboard feeling kind of cheap. So what I've got here is just some inexpensive dielectric grease. It's a silicone-based grease. I just picked it up at the hardware store. It's good for plastic on metal contact, so we will lubricate this wire, the bar here, with it, where it enters each stabilizer, because that's evidently the source of most of the rattle. But I'm also going to lube the actual stems themselves, these parts that go up and down inside each housing. And I'm not positive that dielectric grease is good for plastic on plastic contact. The video I watched, they used a fairly expensive Teflon-based lubricant, and I couldn't find any at the hardware store, and I wasn't about to go order some online, because that would have delayed the filming of this video. And anyway, so you know what? We're just going to wing it here. We're going to use this for the whole assembly. And if it somehow doesn't work or wrecks my stabilizer over the long term, then hey, I've got a spare, right? So for you folks watching at home, if you're going to lube your stabilizers, I recommend you watch a video of somebody who knows what they're doing, and that you follow their instructions and use a proper Teflon-based stabilizer for the stems in the housings. I'm just going to YOLO it. We'll see how it goes. Could be that this is maybe an inappropriate consistency. Maybe it's too viscous to properly lubricate these things. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, these are PCB mount stabilizers, so they will be snapping directly into our PCB here. You can get plate mount stabilizers where they snap onto the plate instead, but those are less common with these kits, I think. Although I've seen them on my other boards, so I don't know. But this is a PCB mount stabilizer, and we're going to have to disassemble it in order to lubricate it. So you can see here that each side is made up of two pieces and a wire. There's the plunger piece, or the stem, I should say, which is this piece that kind of goes up and down. And then there's the housing. So we're going to just remove this wire from this assembly, and it should just snap out. There we go. And you can see that that allows us to withdraw the wire and then pull apart these two pieces, the stem part and the housing part. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to lubricate this stem part. I know it's tough because it's black hardware on a black background. I do apologize for that. It's tough to see. I'm going to lubricate this stem part and slide it back into the housing part. So let's do that. This might get a little messy. You know what? I came prepared. I did bring a piece of paper towel. So actually that probably helps you see what's going on a little better. This is way more grease than I need for this task, but it was the smallest tube that they had at the hardware store. So I'm just gonna squeeze a little bit out here, just a teeny bit, and I'm gonna apply it on kind of all sides, I think, of this here stem. I don't think you need it. Oh, that's probably too much. A little brush or something might help at this stage, but oh well. Okay, so I think that's in there, or that's on there, I should say. And it's probably better to be maybe put on a little extra, a little more rather than a little less, right? I do want this thing to slide smoothly. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to drop it back into the housing. And there's a little notch, you can't see it here, but there's a little notch on here that aligns with a little notch on the housing to make sure that you're putting it in the right way. So let's just drop that back in. All right, like so. Yeah, I'm thinking this might be a little too viscous for what I want to do. But you know what? We'll see. We'll see. We're experimenting. It definitely doesn't move freely in there. But yeah, we'll see. There's probably a reason the pros use the Teflon-based stuff. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little wire. I'm going to just kind of dip it in here. Right up past where it kind of turns the corner there, past that 90-degree angle. Try and get off a little bit of the excess. Like so. And the idea is that this will help control that rattle. And then we're going to take this and we're going to pick up our stabilizer here. And we're going to, there's a hole in here. There it is. I can see it. We got to line this up and push it through so that it goes into that hole. And then snap this back into place. This is getting real mucky, real messy here. Come on. It's just, this whole thing's getting real mucky. Where is that? Well, it should just snap in this bar. There we go. Okay. What a mess. They say this is an irritant, so I'm going to wash my hands after this. Most definitely. Okay, so we've done that for one side, so now our stabilizer should move up and down in there quite smoothly and happily. It's a little tough. I think there's a little too much viscosity there. It's probably why this is not what you use. But you know what? We'll just see how it goes. It might still work. It's very quiet though, and very smooth. Okay, let's do the other one now. So again, we'll just snap this wire out, withdraw it, pop out this here stem. We will apply a bit of this goo all over the stem. My understanding is this dielectric grease is non-conductive, perhaps? That could be wrong too. Honestly, I don't know. But hopefully getting a little bit on the PCB is not going to lead to any issues. Okay. Nicely gooeyed up there. Pop that back in the housing. There it goes. All right, now put a little bit on here. Just turn that corner so that it's nicely coated. And then just have to align the hole in the stabilizer stem and insert. Oops, missed. There. And then snap this into place. Like so. Okay. Oh, nope, that was definitely not right. That was not right at all. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things is upside down. Let's try that again. Let's align. There we go. And then snap it into place. There. Now we've got some very mucky looking stabilizers here, and I'm just gonna wipe off the excess because there's a fair bit of excess that's kind of all over the place there. All right, there's our lubricated stabilizer assembly. Probably done in the worst way possible. Don't know if it's gonna work, but you know what? We'll try it out. We'll see how it goes. And worst case scenario, we've got a spare. Yeah, they're still moving in there, so. Alright, let's get it onto the PCB. So let's bring our PCB over. There it is. This is the side that we're going to be dealing with as we build here. I'll move this over. I'm going to turn this towards me so I can see what I'm doing. This is obviously the top with the USB connector. Down here is where the space bar sits, or not. You have the choice. That's the beauty here. Because of the sort of flexible layout, you can see there's all kinds of holes for various mounting arrangements, whether you want a pair of 2U space bars, or you just want 1U switches all the way along, just 4 of them, or you want a 2U in the middle and 1U on each side. That is the default layout. That is what we will be doing. So I'm going to take our stabilizer assembly here, and the bar is going to face the top of the PCB. This might be different from some stabilizers you've seen. If you look at your board, you might have a bar that faces the bottom, and that is more common on plate-mounted stabilizers. But for this PCB-mounted stabilizer, it's going to face the top here. And there should be a pair of notches or tabs that just fit into these little holes there, like so. Don't know if you can see what's happening, but I'm going to try and hold this in a way that you can. So those tabs just slip in there, and then these little squeeze tabs should just snap into place here. Maybe a little bit more pressure. There we go. There's one. And there's two. Okay. Well, there is our stabilizer. It is mounted. And it is lubricated. So we'll just have to see how that works, if that works. Okay, that step's done. So the next thing then is to mount the PCB and the plate into the case. And this should be pretty straightforward. There's two ways you can do it. They call their extra secure or their loose plate method. We're going to use the extra secure method. I don't need a loose removable plate. So it says here, for the extra secure method, install the PCB into the case and secure using the screws from the bottom side of the case. Can do. So here's our PCB. I'm just going to drop it in very gently right there. And that should just kind of drop into place like so. And then we're going to have to get some screws. So let's see what we got here. Whole collection of screws. These are the ones that we're going to be using to mount the PCB. So if we look on the underside, we've got our screw holes corresponding to the holes on the PCB. So let's do this central one first. So I'm just going to insert this here. This is tough because I'm trying to show you and do it at the same time. And it should poke through right here. I think it's aligned. Let's just do this finger tight first. Yep, there we go. It's emerging. Okay, that's good. You know what? Let's just do these all finger tight to start with, and then I'll grab my. Maybe that's silly. Here, let me just grab my here. Little tiny. It's actually not that tiny. It's a little bit large for what we're doing here, but we'll just take our little head here. The PCB is shifting around a little bit. I'll keep a finger on there to keep it secure. And we'll just screw that in. Good. You can see it's now emerging from the middle of the PCB there. And we will put a spacer on here, and then the back plate, and then a nut on top to secure it. But we're actually going to do this for the other 4 screws first. And I am going to do this because it's a lot easier this way. Alright, let's get to it. They should all align pretty nicely. outrageously tight. Just tight enough to keep everything secure. Okay. There. And it looks like they've provided us with some extra screws. I see 2 extra screws here, which is kind of nice, just in case we accidentally, I don't know, manage to strip these or something. You never know. There we go. And last one. All right, there we are. PCB is now secure in the case. So, next step is these little spacers. They're very tiny, but we're going to screw these onto each screw, and they will provide a gap between the PCB and the back plate. You can see that's what it shows right here. So let's give that a go. Meanwhile, I'll take a look at this and see. Screw the brass hex spacers onto the screws. Okay, there's one. Here goes number 2. There it is. Number 3. I assume these are, yeah, they look the same both ways, so I don't think there's any right or wrong way to put these things on. I'm just doing them up finger tight because I don't think they need to be any tighter than that. It looks like they have supplied us with 1 extra brass spacer. Four and five. There we go. 5 screws, 5 spacers. Now, the plate. I don't think it matters which side of the plate is up. They look about the same. It should just drop onto here. And the only consideration, of course, is you need to have the space bar in the space bar spot. That's pretty important. So let's just do this like so. Should fit right in there. Okay, there's a bit of bend to this plate, actually. There's a little bit of... I wonder if that just happened in shipping, but it's slightly bowed. Ever so slightly. I wonder if I can just bend it back like that. Just so that it sits a little flatter on these screws. Once we secure it down with the hex, what do they call them? the hex nuts, because that's what they are, it probably won't exhibit that little rocking there, but it would be nice to just get it really flat. Just so that it's not even a concern. If it just sat flat, I would be delighted. It's much better than it was. It's just ever so slightly some wiggle there. But you know what? I think when we screw down these hex nuts, the issue's gonna go away. And we've got this little tool here. Oh no, check it out. There's a spare brass spacer that got stuck in here. Hopefully this isn't the part that we need. I think we need this socket. Let's see. Let's drop a hex nut on there, and I will just put it down finger tight there, and then I think we should be able to just use this socket. I think this is the right socket. It's tight fit, but yeah, this is the socket. There we go. Okay, so we're just gonna sure. We're gonna say that's tight enough. Let's do these others. And again, I want this nice and, well, not over tight, but tight enough that, there we go. That feels pretty tight. That there's going to be no wiggle room on this plate. That's pretty good. Maybe a little bit of wiggle there still. There we go. And over here. Good. Very secure. And the last one. Tighten that down. I don't hear any rattle. Do you? That looks and feels and sounds solid. So there it is, with the plate and the PCB installed, and our stabilizers there. So the next step is simply to install our switches. Honestly, that's the next step. So let's do that. A really quick word of warning for anyone who may be watching this. If you're on this step where you're tightening down these hex nuts, you might also have to provide a little bit of a counter torque on the back side of the board, because I found that actually in tightening these down, a couple of them, I actually backed out the screw a tiny bit. So it probably means I was torquing too hard on them anyway, but a little bit counter torque with the screwdriver while you're tightening down with the hex socket on the front there. Will help get them nice and tight without backing those screws out. And you don't want to go overboard on these. I mean, they're not very heavy gauge nuts or screws. So just enough so that it all feels solid and secure. Okay, so as I was saying, the next piece, keycaps will come in a minute, but switches. So let's just bring these in one rail at a time here. And honestly, we're just going to start popping them in. These are hot swappable sockets, and so all we have to do is provide a bit of pressure. Just line up our switch in the socket. Make sure that our contacts here, our pins, are nice and straight so that they should go right into the sockets on the PCB. Just drop it into spot, gentle pressure, pops into place. There it is. And we're going to do that for all the sockets. Now, if you want to get a switch out, let's just throw this in here for the sake of demonstration. It's not going to come out by hand. You're going to have to use a switch puller. Interestingly, this kit does not come with a switch puller, which seems like a funny omission to me, but it should just, you sort of clip it, and there's little latches, one on the front, or one on the bottom, one on the top, or the under, you know what I mean, this side or that side, and you just kind of rock it out, just like that. But you can get these for dirt cheap online, I'm sure. This one came with the Massdrop control, actually. But if you have any other hot swap boards, I'm sure you've got at least one of these. But yeah, I'm sure they're dirt cheap online too. So let's just go through and pop all these switches in. I showed you these switches earlier, and I mentioned that they're manufactured in collaboration with Kaiwa. And you can actually see, if you look at the housing, these are labeled Kale under the switch there. Might be a little hard for you to see, but it's there. Because that is Kaiwa's switch branding. It's feeling good. Oh, it would help if I did it the right way around. Don't install your switches upside down. It won't work very well. You'll bend all the contacts, attempting to shove them into somewhere that they won't fit. If you do happen to bend a contact, one of these pins, you can just bend it back your finger or fingernail or a little tool if you have to, but as long as they're mostly straight, they should go in without too much resistance. It's just the casing snapping into the plate, basically, is the only resistance. It's interesting how the line has been blurred these days in terms of what constitutes building a keyboard. Would you guys consider this building a keyboard? Because some purists probably wouldn't. There's no soldering involved. And so, I think maybe the more old school types feel that this is kind of cheating. As soon as you have hot swap sockets, you're kind of cheating. But it's hard to deny the utility of hot swap sockets because it allows you an awful lot of freedom, right? It increases the value, really, of a keyboard pretty dramatically when you can swap out the switches at will. Because you know what? Sometimes you just get tired of typing on a particular kind of switch. Or maybe you don't know, before you buy some switches, if you're going to like them. Maybe you're just sort of taking a guess, your best guess, right? So, it's nice to have the option to swap out the switches after the fact. That one didn't want to go in quite right. Pins are fine. Just wasn't seated in the socket quite happily. And I'll, of course, test this out afterwards. And it could be that a couple of the pins are bent. That will be pretty apparent because those switches won't work. And that's fine. You just pop them out, bend the pins back, and off you go. So much easier than soldering would be. One thing I am noticing as I'm putting these switches in is that it sounds a little bit pingy, and that's probably, I guess, just that stainless steel plate and the aluminum case combo, perhaps. Maybe this is destined to be a little pingy, but we'll see. Oop. This one's being a little bit stubborn. pins look okay. Nope. Come on. No, that one's also being stubborn. Why am I suddenly having troubles? Once again, pins look okay. There. One more rail of these things should be all it will take to finish this off, I believe. So here we do one here. Now this will be a little interesting because it mounts to the plate on 3 sides, but not the 4th. So we have to make sure it's nice and snug in there so that those pins are going to align properly. This may be a little trickier than I had anticipated. I think this should work, shouldn't it? Okay, so I'm pretty sure these switches actually have to mount upside down. Because if you look on the PCB there, for those, just the sides there, the mounting holes are on for the pins are on the top there. Not for the middle, just for the one on either side there. It seemed to go in that way, so that's curious, but yeah, that does seem to work. And this one should be the other way around. Now this one's going to be a real trick because there's no guide. I just have to kind of hope, line it up in the middle here, and hope that those pins go in where they're supposed to. I'm not confident they did, if I'm being totally honest. Yeah, that front didn't go in. Didn't bend the pins though, so maybe we're okay. Let's try it again. There. Oh boy, we'll see if that works. This is going to be interesting. Very interesting. This is an interesting experience, guys. And the last one. And there we have our completed, well, except for the keycaps, board with all the switches in. No guarantees they're going to work, but I think they will. I have faith. Alright, next step, keycaps. For this part of the video, I am actually going to turn around the keyboard here, like so, so that I can see it from the proper front-facing direction, and I'm going to use this here key map because the layout's a little bit non-standard. The alphanumerics are straightforward enough, but the modifiers are a little weird. So I'm going to consult this, and we'll do this, and then let's just take a bunch of keycaps. Let's just do that. Big old rainbow pile of keycaps. And these I will place on here. Okay, so there goes the J. And this is probably an O, I would think. I'll go over here. Could be a 0. I'm not actually sure. The profile should be a giveaway. I think that's a 0 actually. These keys are they're cherry profile, I think, or OEM. Maybe they're just standard OEM by the looks of it. So maybe that is over here actually. It feels a little taller. Can always swap it out if I find that I'm wrong. The P. Now you might notice I'm not using O-rings on these, and I might actually go back and choose to put some on, but for now I don't have any, or not enough anyway, to do this board, so I'm just going to have to live with no O-rings for the time being. Some people prefer the harder bottom out. I find on a board like this, especially with the bit of pinging that I'm hearing, I would kind of prefer the softer bottom out. Oh, here's one. So here's our space bar. Just a small little 2U space bar. Let's see how our loop job went. First of all, let's see if this will fit on here, given I'm not sure about the placement of this switch. Okay, it does fit on. And it works. It's a pretty muted sound. There's no rattle, but it does feel a little bit gummy. The upstroke is just a little bit slow. And that, my friends, is clearly why you don't use dielectric grease to grease the stems on your stabilizers. We learned something here today. That said, I think it's still totally usable, so we're just going to keep going, because if I wanted to replace the stabilizers now or clean them, it would take a fair bit of work, because I'd have to remove at least the plate. I guess I could do it. I might have to remove the PCB as well. So basically all the switches would have to come out. Yeah, everything would have to come out. So we're going to try it like this, see how it goes. But it does sound nice and smooth. It does sound nice and smooth. AW. The nice thing about the ortholinear layout is it's all very logical. Easy to figure out where things go. I guess that's over here. Although I think I want the gray modifier for that. I think that is an option. Period goes down here. H next to the J. Looks like we got some blanks. I guess you can use those if you want, but I don't think I'll have any room for them. There's the O next to the P. 6. Another blank. Semicolon. L. Z or Z, depending on where you're from. B. Let's get some of these modifiers on. Yeah, there. You see? Oh no, wait. What is this? This is something. I'm actually not quite sure where that goes. I guess this is the comma. This is the comma, not the quote. So this actually has to go down here, next to the period. There we go. That's all of them. Made a big mess now. That's okay though. Will all be ordered in time. N goes there. 4 goes here. Q. 7. R. 5. T. U. G. A. 8. 6. 9. That's 9. D. I. I suppose my the one weakness with my plan here is that this key map here doesn't actually show what the keycaps look like. It just shows the functions, but you might have noticed that some of these keycaps have kind of strange symbols on them that don't necessarily correspond to what you'd expect. Just lots of arrows and things like that. It's a cool looking keycap set, but a little bit confusing. And I expect it's going to take me quite a while, actually, to get the hang of typing on this thing. Partially because it's ortholinear, so there's no staggering. Partially because it's got some functions hidden behind secondary function layers. And partially because the keycaps themselves are not the clearest. But that's how you get that nerd cred, right? Goes the E. And the X. And the F. So that it's going to be really weird typing on this thing. But those are all the alphas. So So now I have to figure out these mods, and actually for that I'm going to just use my phone, and I can look at a picture of the default layout for this board. So these arrow keys, that's backspace in the top right, and then I believe the same key is used in the top left, and that would be, no, not that one, it's got to be one of these purple things. No, there we go. And so that would be, oh no, actually that's incorrect, because anyone that points the other way, maybe I don't have one. Alright, well, that's what I've got, I guess. Lots of gray options here. These here are up and down, I believe. So this is layer up, layer down for accessing additional function layers. Let me look at my picture here. I've got, oh, I see. So on the default layout, here, let me just use my keycap puller here. This is actually not an accent color. I'm so used to escape being an accent color. But escape is actually down here. That makes perfect sense. Well, it makes sense that would be the accent color, because that is where escape is. It is a little strange to put escape here, though. At least in my mind, but that's okay. What else do we have here? So then we've got one of these guys over here. This guy right there. The enter key, which looks like you might expect. That goes right here. And a variety of arrow keys. We have the down key goes here. This looks like a left. It's a little tricky because you have to, no, that's wrong. See, the profile's wrong there. So let's pull that out. You have to consider the profile. There we go. This might be a right key. My phone has gone to sleep. My screen's turned off. Okay, so we have down, up. So right would go over here. There, that looks right. Ha. That looks correct. And then, I don't know where this gets used. Over here, this is shift. That makes sense. Tab is going to be this one right here. No, not that one. Not that one. They do give you a lot of extra options here, though, which is nice. Okay, surely I can figure this out from here. Oh, that's an interesting one. Evidently that is control. Again, all of this can be reprogrammed in QMK. So if you have a different preference of layouts, or you want to use different keycaps, you absolutely can. This is the function key, although apparently that's upside down, according to this image. Apparently we need to use this one. And then this one is Alt. And it goes right there. A little bit confusing. And then there should be this one. Just kind of a, oh no, there's got to be another one like this. There. So the up kind of carrot looking thing, not carrot the vegetable, but carrot the character, the little hat. That goes there. Let's find the rest of these arrows. There's a left arrow. And there's an up arrow. And the last thing we're missing is something to go up here. And it's supposed to look like this, but this is the wrong direction. So it's got to be this one. No, these both point left. That's confusing. Ah, there we go. There, and that's actually the taller profile you can see. Intended for that top row. There it goes. And that, my friends, is a board. So we've got quite a few leftover keys here, which is kind of nice, I suppose. We've got, oh, actually, as a matter of fact, this key is too short. It's not the right profile for that top row. So we actually need this one. There. That is how it looks like on drop. And I think I've got it all right. If not, I'll figure it out pretty quick. So we've got all these orange modifiers left over. If you wanted, you could use those. You could use a combination of the purple and orange, but I like the purple. Got one left over purple mod. Got a leftover space because you could have two of these here. And then a whole bevy of gray modifiers left over that could replace the purple ones. And then a couple of blank caps. Blank white caps as well. So I'm going to have to put this key map right next to my keyboard for now while I learn to use this thing. I'm going to spend a little bit of time learning to type on it, and then I'll film myself doing some typing, because I bet you'd like to see that and hear that. Now that we've successfully, I believe, put this thing together, it's been quite the journey so far, hasn't it? These things take time. Especially so when you're doing it softly and quietly for an ASMR video, but there it is, the completed Preonic Rev3. So, I guess we're on to the typing test. I'm going to go try this out for a while, but you guys are going to get to hear it and see it right now. Let's go check it out. And here we have the Preonic V3 plugged in, and I've been using this for the last few days, and I have to say, I didn't expect it to be so difficult initially to figure out the ortholinear layout, like typing on it. It at first really felt pretty limiting. Like I was just trying to type away and I just kept, mistyping. But after the first day or two, it certainly improved, and now I can type pretty well. Still not as well as I could on a regular keyboard, I don't think. But I think part of the problem for me is that I keep switching back and forth. I'm using this one, and I'm using standard layouts, and I use this one in standard layouts because I'm reviewing a couple of other keyboards right now. But that's maybe a problem that's more unique to me. And most people, if they, pick up an ortholinear keyboard and use that, I think within a week, you'll probably be more or less back to normal. Everything is in the same place. It's just offset a little bit differently than you're used to, or not offset, as the case may be. I actually took some time to customize the layout of this board to my liking. And you do that with something called QMK, which stands for Quantum Mechanical Keyboard, I think. It's an open source firmware that's used by a whole variety of keyboards. And the great benefit of QMK is that it is so configurable. And you can basically set up your keyboard exactly how you want. You can program it if you are comfortable with that, or you can use their online configurator to generate your own key map, and then you download the firmware file, you flash it to your board. It is a bit involved, and I'm not going to show you the process here because that's beyond the scope of this video. But it took me a few hours to figure it out and to create a key map that I liked. But it is very, very powerful. And the default key map for the Preonic isn't bad, but there were just some things that I thought were unintuitive. Like, for instance, the bottom left corner of the keyboard here was right shift. It was bound to right shift, or like some weird multifunction key or something. I'm always used to the bottom left corner being control, because I do, control C, control V, whatever. And so not having it there bothered me quite a bit. So I fixed that. I moved right shift over here. And now this is a shared shift and enter key. So if I tap it, it's enter. If I hold it down, it acts like shift. I moved the escape button from the middle of the left side back up to the top left corner because, again, that's where I'm used to it and that's where I'm comfortable with it. And I put this little orange accent key on here just because I thought it was kind of fun. Those kinds of things. I also configured it so that the entire right side of the board, when you're holding down the right hand modifier key, this just becomes a numpad. So you can use this as you would a numpad, which is pretty cool. That's, again, additional functionality packed into this really very small frame. Also happy to report that the spacebar has loosened up a bit. I'll show you what I mean. I think that's much springier than it was initially. I think it took a little bit of time for that dielectric grease to sort of work its way into a place where it's well lubricated and sort of situated there. But overall, having said all that, after getting it set up the way I like it and learning to type more effectively on this ortholinear layout, I am loving this little board. And honestly, like, I came home today from the lab. I was really tired. I had been counting stuff at the microscope all day. I just wasn't in a great mood. And I came and I saw this little thing on my desk, and I was immediately happier. I know I'm a huge mechanical keyboard nerd. I can't really explain why it made me so much happier, but it did. I'm just like happy to interact with it. So it's so cute. I like the colors. It's kind of pretty. And I like these switches. I like these clears a lot. They are, as one might expect, an awful lot like a Cherry MX Brown, but a lot smoother. None of the scratchiness that you get out of a brown. So they're a bit more like a Gatoron brown in that respect. But they're also quite a bit heavier. And if you like a heavy switch, then that's great news. If you don't, you might be better off with a Gatoron brown or something. But these Halo Clears are really, they feel very tight to type on, if that makes sense. Like the feeling of tactility is very smooth all the way through the motion, and that heavy bottom out really encourages you to actually not bottom all the way out. And it almost feels like it's hard to describe, like it's almost suctioned on there or something. Like the feeling is very smooth and very continuous. I know I'm not describing it that well, but it has this feeling of almost suction, like a plunger mechanism in there. It's not a plunger mechanism, but it has a bit of that feel to it. Okay, so that's really what I had to say about that. The board is delightful. The switches are excellent if you like a heavier tactile switch that's nice and smooth all the way through. The tactile bump is pronounced, but again, because it's such a smooth motion, it's not a sharp tactile bump, if that makes sense. Whereas I've, felt the action of like Zelios before, and that's a more pronounced bump. But I like this smooth action as well. So there you have it. Now that I've rambled for a little bit, I think it's time to test this out. I will say, I'll talk a little bit more about QMK and the QMK firmware in my Massdrop Control keyboard review, which is forthcoming because that keyboard also uses the QMK firmware. And I show the online configurator for that board in that video, so you will get a look at that, and I'll talk a bit more about it. But you can go look it up if you're curious. It's really excellent because it is so flexible. Okay, enough talking. Let's type on this thing. And that, my friends, is just about gonna do it for this video. I hope that you enjoyed what we did here today, our unboxing and our build log video. It was a pleasure having you along for the ride. I really enjoyed my first time building a mechanical keyboard from the ground up. It was a real pleasure. It was not honestly that difficult. It's the kind of thing that pretty much anybody can do with a screwdriver, reading the instructions, and a spare afternoon or so. So I hope that by watching this here today, maybe your interest has been sparked a little bit in mechanical keyboards, in the nerdier side of mechanical keyboards. Maybe you want to venture a little bit further down that rabbit hole. And if you're interested in checking out the Preonic, I do recommend that you check it out ASAP, because as I described in the introduction, it's typically available in these very limited time runs, and one such drop is beginning on the day I publish this video. So check it out in the video description. There's a link down there, also at the top of the comments, if the Preonic is something you're interested in, if you like the look of it. And honestly, who wouldn't? This thing is, it's so cute, and it's so cool, and it's so nerdy, and I just love it. It's practical in its own strange roundabout way. I know, my girlfriend Sarah, she looks at it and she says, why? There's a learning curve associated with it. You got to put it together. She says a keyboard should just work. And I say, because it's cool, because it's fun, because the process of building it and customizing it and making it your own is as much a part of the experience as the ultimate usage. And you kind of get out what you put in. That's my experience with the Preonic Rev3 anyway. So if you would like to check it out again, I suggest you do it ASAP. Links below the video. I hope that you found this informative. I hope you found it interesting. Above all, I hope you found it relaxing. Special thanks, of course, to drop.com for sending over the Preonic build kit that I built here today, as well as the switches, the halo clears that I put into it. There's a link for those down below the video if you'd like to check them out as well. And of course, special thanks to every single one of you for watching, as always, and for coming along with me on this big first step, my first full custom build. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I look very forward to having you all back here next time. Bye for now, guys.